Hello, my name's Tahisha. I'm going to be your host for this little short talk about microaggressions and the impact on your health. I think most people know this, but let's dive a little bit into it. So, today we're talking about microaggressions, and really it's about words and the harm that can have and the harm they can have on your health. So, I think most people know that microaggressions can harm us emotionally, psychologically, but they also have a physical impact on us. Microaggressions are those subtle, often unintentional comments or actions that happen that communicate a hostile attitude or a bias towards a marginalized group. And when I'm talking about marginalized groups for this, really what I'm talking about are those people who do not hold power in your community, in your environment, wherever you're occupying. These are the people that don't have as strong a voice as you might if you are the majority in the community we're referring to. So it's often these brief, they're sort of short, everyday exchanges. They trigger a stress response. And so when they trigger that stress response over time, what happens is every time we're impacted by stress, right? We have this like rise in our cortisol level. And when our cortisol level kind of goes up, we get elevated blood pressure, and it has this whole other host of things that happen. Weakens our immune system. It's not great, right? So stress, we know, is not something we want. There can be helpful stress, but when we're talking about microaggressions, we're not talking about helpful stressors. So the physical impact of microaggressions. So if I were to talk about a microaggression, it might be something like saying, "Oh, that's so gay," right? So my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, that was a frequent statement that was said, but it also implies harm, right? So that's so gay. It's not a positive statement. Or you speak English so well. What does that mean? Why would you say that? What are you basing that on? So these small, and they seem small, and they seem like, oh, well, what's the big deal? Why are we even talking about this? Over time, the continuous assault of microaggressions triggers and causes more harm. So constantly, or think of it this way, constantly having to feel like you have to justify your belonging or your right to be in a space is exhausting. So if you constantly had to say to your boss, here's why you hired me, here's why I deserve to be working here. Or if you constantly had to say to someone who is in a greater authority position than you. I'll use this example. So there is an unequal balance between children and their parents. So oftentimes children will, as they get older, will talk about, I really felt like I had to earn my parents' respect when I became an adult. I had to shift their thinking from I am a child to I'm an adult. Think about how that impacted your emotional health. So when you constantly have to explain or justify your need to be someplace, your sense of belonging, this leads to mental fatigue. And it leads to you having to do work that you wouldn't otherwise have to do. And so, what does that do overall? It begins to erode your self esteem. It's like you're always sitting there trying to justify yourself. So then you begin to buy into that a little bit. You begin to think, well, maybe there's a reason. Maybe you start to question yourself more. And so all of these things kind of add together to create this feeling of unworth. And the long term health consequence of this is that studies have shown that chronic exposure to microaggressions. So you constantly feel like you're having to justify why you belong, increases your risk of depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and this goes up to, a 50% increase in communities that are marginalized, communities like the LGBTQ plus community, racial and ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups. And this is from the American Psychological Association 2020. You can see it right there. And so when it comes to microaggressions in the workplace, um, research shows that it is these subtle comments, these actions, they communicate this sort of negative sense of you don't belong. And when it comes to teams, they did a study of over 1,000 employees, and they found that those who were experiencing microaggressions had a 25% lack of cohesion in the team, meaning the team doesn't get along great. And that impacts performance. If you've ever worked on a team that doesn't get along well, it doesn't really help with team output. So when team members feel marginalized, they feel disrespected, they feel unlistened to, this really chips away and eats away at the sense of the shared purpose of the team. And so if you look at engagement and belonging at organizations, research shows that if you're working in an area where microaggressions are tolerated or microaggressions aren't considered worthy of discussion, this can reduce employee engagement by 12. So all of these things matter when you're talking about output, when you're talking about productivity. All of these things decrease the productivity of the organization. So what can I do about this? It's very simple in many ways. We have to create a culture of change. And to create a culture of change, you need to empower people to speak up, to empower those that are in your organization to call out microaggressions. So simple things like, and I'm saying simple, it's actually emotionally harder than this, but empowering employees to say, hey, that term was harmful. You know, can we rephrase that? It doesn't feel great when you talk to me that way. It not only strengthens the team, but it reduces team tension overall. So for leaders, I really want you to think about the phrase here that I have. That term can be hurtful. Let's rephrase. So thinking about what are the microaggressions that you hear and how do you support those employees that are hearing them and taking them in? And how are you as a leader leading with compassion and creating a sense of belonging at your organization? So, just want to leave you with this a little sip, reflect, and act. Next time you hear a biased remark, I want you to just pause. I want you to take a breath. I want you to choose your words intentionally. And if you're a leader, I want you to work to be an active ally and an active advocate for the health and emotional health of your team and intervene because your small interventions, they can create big change. Today's subject was microaggressions, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to work more closely with me, please reach out. Send me a direct message. Reach out on the website. We offer coaching, we offer sensitivity reviews, and we offer speaking services. Talk to you later.